Hi, everyone. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jesus Rodriguez, and welcome to Chavista Chronicles from Caracas. Today, we have two great guests from Canada, Venezuelans living in Canada for several decades already, and great friends of Orinoco Tribune, and people that we admire because of the word of solidarity they do in Canada with Venezuela, with the Bolivarian Revolution, with Chavismo. So I'm very happy to have here today Maria Paez Victor and Nino Pagliccia, which are among the most active Venezuelans that I know doing work defending Chavismo in Venezuela. Not only in Venezuela, but in all over Latin America. So welcome, compañeros, compañera. And I'm gonna start, before going to the question, reading Maria's and Nino's short bio. So Maria Paez Victor is a sociologist born in Caracas, Venezuela, where she obtained her first degree. She has an MA from the University of Kent at Canterbury, and a Ph.D. from York University in Canada. She lives in Toronto and travels regularly to Venezuela and Britain. A lifelong enthusiast of Latin American and British history and politics, she participates regularly on Canadian and Venezuelan television and radio and at public events, and has published numerous articles on recent and historical topics in both English and Spanish. She is the founder of the Círculo Bolivariano Louis Riel in Canada. And Nino Pagliccia is, how do you say it, Nino? Is Pagliccia or Pagliccia? Because I know that from Italian, people use the double C like a che, right?
That would be the Italian accent, it would be Pagliccia, but in the Spanish in Venezuela, I became Pagliccia.
Exactly, okay, so it's Pagliccia. Okay. So Nino is a Venezuelan Canadian statistician who writes about international relations with a focus on the Americas. He has managed collaborative projects with Cuban partners in the University of British Columbia's Global Health Research Program. He is the editor of Cuba Solidarity in Canada, 5 Decades of People-to-People Foreign Relations in 2014, and he has been the vice president of the Canadian-Cuban Friendship Association in Vancouver. And he is a founding co-chair of the Canadian Network on Cuba. He has led groups doing voluntary work in Cuba for over 12 years. So welcome, compañeros, again. And I'm gonna start immediately with the first question that I have for you. So feel free, any one of you, to answer the questions, and then the other one jump, complementing it. So my first question is, what is your opinion about the 21st regional elections held in Venezuela like 3 weeks ago already?
Well, if I may start off this conversation, first of all, it was a tremendous win. You know, in elections, it's like a race. No matter what happens during the race, you cross that line, you won. And the PSUV won an extraordinary win. The PSUV, I mean, the Polo Patriótico, the government party, and all the groups that support it. Now, why do I say that it's extraordinary? Because if just one of the things that has happened to the Venezuelan economy had happened in Canada, in the United States, in Europe, anywhere, if any of these democracies had had a fifth of the economic woes that Venezuela has had because of the sanctions, the government would have fallen. The government would have fallen with no, it isn't even a prediction. It is a certainty. And yet, with everything that has been thrown to Venezuela, with all that the Venezuelan people have suffered, they voted for the government. They voted for them to win because, of course, all these economic woes are coming from outside. This is a foreign power that is attacking the country. And a bit like what happened with Hitler and the Blitz, maybe not as exaggerated as that, but Hitler thought that he would bomb London and he would break the back of the British people, and immediately the British people would give up. The contrary happened. The British people said, we don't care. You can kill us all, but we're not going to give up. And something like that has happened in Venezuela. And I love it when I hear the ordinary people saying, you know, we're going to carry on and we don't care. And, you know, no matter what they throw at us. And this is what has happened. It's made the government of President Maduro stronger, and it's made the people really give them a great win. But there's also something else. It was a win for democracy, you know, at last. I mean, how can the world not see that with the participation of almost all the opposition parties, this is not a democracy. This was another win. The fact that you had people who just yesterday wanted to overthrow the government are now doing politics, which is what they should do. They have entered, you know, the realm of politics and stood for election, which I was delighted to see. I mean, I don't like any of them, but I really like that they participated and are now taking out these ideas that they're going to overthrow the government and they want to win the elections. And then there is another win. At last, we see where the opposition is strong. We didn't know before, but now we've got the geopolitical map. Now the PSUV, if they have, I'm sure they have their own sort of analysts looking there. Now it isn't a question of, you know, I said, he said, they're saying that we've got a map of the country. We know where the opposition is, where it is strong, where it is weak, and that is invaluable for going ahead, for, you know, turning the page, doing a future work, and quite frankly, renovating and making the revolution stronger. So I think it was a fantastic win. And I'm very glad to see that I just read that Moncada got in the UN, 92% of the countries of the UN, you know, saying, yes, Maduro is a legitimate and democratic government. So quite frankly, I celebrated this win, and I congratulate the people of Venezuela, and I congratulate President Maduro and the PSUV. And there's one last thing about these elections. Yes, we think that, you know, it was 49%, I think, voter turnout. That's enormous. People were saying, oh, you compare this to other, and yes, it might have gone down. But in most regional elections, in anywhere in the world, most regional elections are low. This wasn't a presidential election where, you know, the animus is heightened. So even with that turnout, by the way, it was a higher turnout than the presidential for Chile, the higher turnout for many, many presidential elections, including the United States and including Canada. So it wasn't as bad as the thing is, we like to have more because we're used to more elections. So I think this election is a turning point in the history of the Bolivarian Revolution and of Venezuela. We are going to see a different scenario and a different politics after this. I don't know if Nino agrees with me, Nino?
Well, I think I agree 100%, Maria. I think your analysis, your perception is quite accurate. Not only that, your enthusiasm, I share your enthusiasm about the win, the election win in Venezuela. There's no doubt about that, that we should celebrate that win. No matter how people would look at it, and no matter how people will analyze it, and they might turn it around to their advantage. But the reality, the objective reality is that in fact, this was an extraordinary win of Chavismo, for Chavismo. And there is no doubt that that's a full endorsement of the party government, President Maduro. And so we should really be, you know, aware of that. Now, about what you said, I think one thing that, yes, you mentioned the participation of the radical opposition that is endorsed, by the way, by the U.S. I think that was great. I think that was great. Now I have a little observation about the timing. I kept asking myself, why would the opposition, the radical opposition, participate in the election now after so many years of boycotting all elections? And I think, I don't think I have a full answer to that, but I think something comes to mind. I think, first of all, the obvious thing, I think they had the green light from the US. Everything the radical opposition does, in my view, given previous experience, this has to have the rubber stamp of the US government. So having received that, still then, we need to ask the question of why now? And I think in my quick answer to that is that I think that this was a trial run. I think in view possibly of 2024, which is still 3 years away, but still this is a trial run to see realistically what the opposition forces strength is, because so far they didn't even know. They didn't know that. They claimed, all the support, the majority of Venezuelans and so on. There's no indication of that at all. So this was really a trial run to test the ground and see how strong are we really, okay? So that to me justifies the participation of the Mesa de la Unidad and so on. I'm speaking the radical opposition, not the democratic opposition, as we also call the other side. Now, in terms of the fact that as you said, Maria, that this is also an indication of the political map within Venezuela. I think that's very accurate. But in fact, we should remember that regional elections have usually that characteristic, because of the regional elections have mapped the whole different regions to the municipal level of Venezuela. I think we see clearly where all the different political forces are, as opposed to presidential elections, where, presidential elections, the president, period. But here we can see clearly where they are. Now, but in relation to that, I have not a concern, but I have a comment about the fact that the radical opposition have won Zulia. Zulia, to me, is a strategic state in Venezuela for one reason, because of the oil resources, but it's also a border state. Okay, now the PSU, the government party, the government has control of all the border with Colombia, except now Zulia. That is very crucial, having that protection, because that's where the mercenaries come from. And in fact, the last invasion of mercenaries came through Zulia. And so that is something that we should be concerned about. Now, I would have more comments about the low voters turnout, but I don't want to take over the whole thing. And maybe Maria would have more comments about this.
Well, I just want to say something about Zulia. First of all, the PSUV got all the border states really important, with the exception of Zulia. But even the state of Zulia, what was really good about that opposition win, which was terrible when I just saw it, it was that the fellow who won there was Rosales. It was not one of these crazy young hawks that we have had. It was not a Guaido, a Lopez, a Stalin. It was none of these guys who, quite frankly, their ignorance has been appalling. Their ignorance of politics. We've got an old timer there. We've got Rosales, who's an old political hack, an old adeco, huh? And he knows how to play politics. Now, to me, I prefer to be dealing with that adversary and not these lunatics, Leopoldo Lopez and Guaido and Stalin and all the rest who are like cannons. You never know what they're going to do. Now, I'm not saying that I don't like Acción Democrática and I don't like Rosales, okay? So please do not accuse me of being on their side. But I am saying that this is a man who is going to try to actually govern Zulia.
He even met with Maduro.
Huh? Oh, yes.
Oh, just comment.
That was another brilliant thing that Maduro did. Who does he call in to speak his opposition? Why? Because you don't negotiate with the people that are with you. You negotiate with the people who are against you. You know, those are the ones you have to bring to the table. Come on, let's see how we're going to play this game. And the three states that we lost, Nueva Esparta, well, this guy is really ancient. He's older than me. And he has been in Nueva Esparta all his life, you know. The guy in Cojedes is the same.
Morel Rodriguez, yes.
And Rosales. These are three old guys who know how to play politics. And I think that that is, quite frankly, the best possible outcome of an opposition win, okay? The other thing that I think has happened with respect to this is that why now? This was such a good question of yours, Nino. Why now? I think something really important happened in the United States. I don't have very much hope for the United States, but they have got a group of what they call, in their mind, radical Democrats in Congress. And as much as we don't think they're very radical, compared to what's there, they are. And if there's one thing that they have said over and over again, they do not want an invasion of Venezuela or of any other Latin American country. They are, not that they're on our side, but this is what they say. This is enormous because during all these years, these crazy opposition people have been throwing at us the specter of invasion by the United States or through Colombia or with Colombia. I have been, you know, on my knees praying for Venezuela every time this specter, you know, came up. Now they know, hey, that's gone. We don't have that in our arsenal. I think this was a very important point for these guys. The second thing that I think that they're leaving the rats leaving the sinking boat is because they got caught stealing. And if, you know what happened to Al Capone? He killed a whole bunch of people, but they didn't put him in jail for those murders. They put him in jail for tax evasion and stealing. And already USAID has said, you know, $200 million have disappeared. We don't know where they are. And I think these guys are trying to wash their hands like Pontius Pilate. We didn't take this money because the Americans can go after them over what happened to the money. But this is my speculation. This is my speculation. You know,
that's true, and that's connected, Maria, with the end of Guaido also, you know, and what Nino mentions about the moment, you know, and I believe that that is also connected to the end of Guaido. I mean, we have been talking about the end of Guaido for several months already, maybe a couple of years, and I hate right now listening to that, you know, phrase, the end of Guaido.
Getting
but
closer.
Right now it seems closer than ever, you know, because of what you have just said. So that might be connected also to the moment of the elections and the moment of the participation of the opposition in the elections. That's absolutely true. And also, going back, just before going to the second question, I just wanted to say that the turnout in the election was 42%. And it was in Chile, it was in the presidential that happened the same day, it was 49%, which was very close. I mean, and as you say, Maria, in comparing a regional election with a presidential one is absolutely impossible. And even in that scenario, we had a turnout similar to the one in Chile, and above many, as you say, above many turnouts in other even presidential elections in other countries. So
in
another
relation,
thing that I wanted to add is that recently I've been checking and rechecking the numbers in the CNE website. And a lot of Chavista analysts have been talking about this, and I know it's true. I mean, one of the other outcome out of the 21 of November elections is a new reconfiguration of the opposition forces in Venezuela, because as far as what I've been seeing in the results by states, I mean, the G4 and all those parties that were, around the mood card in these elections, which are mainly what we call in Venezuela G4, which is Acción Democrática, Voluntad Popular, Primero Justicia, and Un Nuevo Tiempo, they did not want most of the, I mean, they didn't even reach the second place when they lost. In most of the instances, they reach, I mean, they only get the third, I mean, they arrive in third place in most of the states. And that's an analysis that I believe that is need to be done. I'm gonna try to do it through Orinoco Tribune, because yesterday I realized what I'm telling you, and I believe that is also important to put those numbers and analyze those numbers, because it will say a lot.
Good.
So
Yeah.
you're gonna add something, Nino?
No, just wanted to say that's exactly the kind of analysis that we need on the actual votes on who votes
The
for
opposition.
whom, and that's the kind of it. Not about the voter turnout and so on. So I think that's important. Okay, I will hold off my comment on that, but I think that a fair analysis has to be made. Only to say this, that the drop in voters turnout, when did it start? In 2015. That's 2015. You can see I have a chart right here.
Obama executive order.
If you can see that, exactly, that's when it started, which also coincides, of course, with the boycott from the opposition. But that's precisely what it started. Now, not to mention that usually regional turnout is always lower than presidential turnout, and that's what this shows. This happens in Canada. In Canada, we have the same kind of situation. I think that we have to be aware of that. I'll end with that comment.
Now I'm gonna jump to the second question, compas. Okay. The question is how Canada and the Canadians are dealing in the fight against imperialism. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Well, Jesus, they're not, okay? That is the truth, okay? We don't have a revolution here. There's no revolution. And anybody who goes out the street, says, hey, revolution, people look at them and say, oh, look, isn't that funny? So we have the left party, which is the NDP. And the NDP, the NDP is a sad excuse of a left wing. I mean, it wasn't so very long ago. I think it was 5 years ago. They were actually debating in their convention whether they should take the name socialist out of their name, you know. So, you know, they just want to be in there to playing with the big guys. Now, this time around, we've had a pretty dynamic fellow, John Metzing, who has done, I would say, a pretty good as far as the NDP goes. But they have never, for example, backed Venezuela. And if they have said something, it has been very, very muted. We brought a sort of a declaration in their latest convention of backing Venezuela, and it almost got to the vote, but at the end they didn't bring it. So where is the fight in Venezuela? I mean, in Canada. I'll tell you where it is. It's with the indigenous peoples. And if I could say something to the president of Venezuela or the PSUV or somebody in Venezuela who had some sort of decision, I would say your best bet is to try and get a good relationship with the diverse indigenous peoples of Canada. Why? Because the indigenous people of Canada have two concepts that are dear to Venezuela. One, the concept of pueblo, a people. They each consider themselves a people. Second of all, they consider themselves a nation, sovereign nation. These two words, which should be important in any democracy, are absolutely absent from the conversation, the political conversation in Canada. Nobody in Canada talks here of any importance about sovereignty. Nobody here talks about the people of Canada. No, they always call it, population or something of the sort. So I think that we have to try and speak with them, because you see, these are the ones that you have thinkers and you have people like us that we write and we publish this or the other, but we don't have a following. We don't have, our own little group, we have our own little community, but we can't stand up and say people vote for us. The real movement here is coming from the indigenous people. I'll give you two examples. One, the disaster, the horrific scandal of the residential schools. I don't know whether you've heard of this.
Yes, terrible.
These residential schools were created and carried on and under the absolute governing of the state of Canada. And it wasn't just Sir John A. Macdonald, who started in 18 whatever. It went through all these years. Second of all, we have very topical, the pipeline that Justin Trudeau, who speaks the wonderful words of environment and how, oh yes, we're going to, save the planet, wants to put a pipeline, an oleoducto, through one of the most pristine, most beautiful areas that you can imagine on this planet, and it's here in Canada, through the land of indigenous peoples without their consent. Now they have been out on the street. They have been blocking roads. They have been saying, hold on again, we are a people, we have rights. You cannot do this to us because you haven't even consulted with us. And you know what the reaction of this is a federal government, by the way. This is not a provincial government. This is Justin Trudeau. They militarized the RCMP. That means the RCMP is the federal police force of Canada. They went in there like they were going to war, and they put people in jail. And this is not done in Canada very much, and you might be accustomed to seeing this in the United States, but in Canada, this is bad stuff. And so the real fight against imperialism is embodied in the fight of the indigenous peoples for their identity, for their land, for their sovereignty. There is one other exception here. The only other part of Canada that does understand what a people is and what sovereignty is are the Quebecois, the people of Quebec, which was, colonized by the French. Unfortunately, they are not too keen about the sovereignty of their indigenous people. So there are two sovereignties there that are a bit kind of messy. But I do believe that now there has been a reaction of ordinary Canadians of utter disgust at the treatment of the indigenous peoples, people who before never even dreamed that something like residential school could have happened in this land. And so I think that that is helping, because the first thing to have a change, a social change, is you've got to change the mentality. You have to change the way you look at something. And I think the indigenous peoples are actually changing the way Canadians are now looking at their history and at their government. The other thing that is in the works is that we have a very unrepresentative democracy. And year after year, we talk about this can't be first past the post. We've got to have some sort of scheme in which there is more representation in Ottawa than there is. We don't have proportional representation. So if you lose and you're out. That's a parliamentary system like there is in England. So I think that if I wanted to have change in Canada, I would go for the change in the electoral process in Canada. And second of all, the government of Canada is very elitist. Very elitist, is much more elitist than the American one. So you have a ministry like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is a government in itself. You know, most ministries, like if you have a Ministry of Agriculture, which is provincial, they have a lot of relationships with the farmers, you know, and the people who sell to the farmers and the market of the farmers. And so there's always a back and forth with those people. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has nothing. Do you think us as Latin Americans are ever consulted? Do you think that the Minister of Foreign Affairs calls a meeting of the Latin American groups to, you know, let's see what our policy should be? Nothing. They could care less whether we're here or not. So there has to be a change within of how power is exercised in this is something which we need a lot of legal power behind, but this is certainly something that is needed. But I go back to what I just said, that I wish with all my heart that Venezuela had more relations with the indigenous people. I was privileged, so privileged to have been invited to the big meeting of indigenous peoples of the Americas that took place in Caracas just before the pandemic. And I was there with all the delegations of the indigenous peoples of all from the United States all the way down. And guess who was representing Canada? Me. And I'm not indigenous. There was not one indigenous person from Canada. There were people from the Cherokee, the Apaches, people from the United States, all Central America, all South America. They were all there. They were fantastic. It was just one of the greatest things I've ever been to. And people would say, tú eres de Canada. And I'm going, yes, but I'm not indigenous. So I was very worried that people would think that I was appropriating this. But that's when it dawned on me. Venezuela must, because here indigenous people can learn from us. Look at how in these elections, one of the most fantastic things in the elections of Venezuela was how the indigenous people chose their own leaders. You know, it wasn't, here we have an adefesio, we have a monstrous law called the Indian Act. It's monstrous, I can't tell you, it's like an octopus, it's horrendous, right? It is the basis with which the Canadian settler society dominates the indigenous peoples, you know. So much so that they don't even accept the traditional way of indigenous peoples' way. They have their own leaders. In Venezuela, each ethnic group chose their candidates according to their own, customs,
Traditions,
and then they held separate elections for there. So there's so many things that Canada could learn from Venezuela, but I think the doorway would be through the indigenous people. I don't know, Nino, what do you think?
No, I totally agree. I mean, that's such an important issue. Yeah, I was thinking, in fact, in terms of the elections, I was thinking, as you mentioned, like on the 26th, the indigenous people of Venezuela had their own elections. Well, when would you dream something like that happening here in Canada? That would be impossible. You know, I mean, they're still claiming their own land and so on and so forth, which they have not achieved. And we always, as Canadians, whenever we are in public meetings, you know, we always, you know, chant this this little phrase of recognition, you know, we are in the territory of the indigenous people and so on and so forth, which is a sort of just a token, minor statement. So definitely that's an important. You also mentioned something very important, which is about democracy in Canada. You also said, you know, I always say publicly, now I'm becoming much more open about that. There's no democracy in Canada. When you have 105 members of the Senate being appointed, not elected, you know, by the Prime Minister, you know, I guess that's not a democracy. So Canada should stay away from speaking about democracy, no democracy in Venezuela, and saying that the rule of law, whatever they call it, in Venezuela, see, they break the rule of law. Which rule of law? Maybe it's the rule of law that Canada has that's be dismantled. But on the specific issue of the foreign policy, meaning the fight against imperialism in Canada. I want to bring in maybe a broader, Maria, you've been great focusing on sort of the domestic realm, maybe where the Canadian imperialism shows up, capitalism and imperialism and capitalism for that matter. But I want to bring that to the foreign policy, which you also have mentioned in part. But I think what's happening and why in Canada there isn't a real fight back against imperialism. It's because imperialism is the ideology of foreign policy. When you speak of foreign policy, you are either in solidarity, like in the case of Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and so on. That's your foreign policy, which is a cooperation and solidarity with other countries, or you become imperialist. And this is what's happening with Canada. Canada has adopted in its foreign policy imperialism as its own ideology. So when we talk about that, I think it becomes very difficult for Canadians, most Canadians, to really understand what's behind what imperialism really translates into, and what's really the implication of foreign policy. Foreign policy is a very, very complex area of analysis, of study to follow. I decided in my own personal political work to focus on foreign policy, because to me, that is the crux, that is the important issue that all nations should address if they want to have an impact in their own domestic policy. And I'm pretty strong about that, and I've written about it as well. So to me, that is the issue, but it's very difficult to understand. Foreign policy has to be broken down. The analysis has to be diluted, has to be processed, has to be presented in a very understandable way. Like, you know, what do we see, for instance, like US and Canada there's no difference in terms of the foreign policy, no matter which government is in power. In Canada, that is precisely what's happening. like, liberals, conservatives. You mentioned the NDP. The NDP can be quite imperialistic, Maria. I'm convinced of that. At least they have shown some inclination. They've lost their socialist reputation and myth, and now they're embracing imperialism as well. Not to mention the Green Party and so on and so forth. But I don't want to get into that. Just to say that when it comes to foreign policy, countries, governments tend to implement or have a similar policy, regardless of which party is in government. Now, take this in Canada as an example of imperial foreign policy. Trudeau just recently, Trudeau's government is planning to buy 88 new fighter jets and 15 combat vessels. Now, this has an outrageous cost. It has been reported that the fighter jets alone would cost $82 billion just up front, not to mention the maintenance and so on over the lifetime of the jets, and $286 billion over the lifetime, in fact. But it's for the combat vessels, $19 billion spent on that. This is a policy of warmongering. This is a warfare policy. It's an imperial policy. It's not nothing to do. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Maria.
Something about those jets. Speaking with pretty high up people in the military here in Canada, they expressed openly that they were against buying these jets because they are no good at all for what they need in Canada. That in Canada, with our geography and the kind of emergencies that we have, what they really need is high-powered helicopters, because with helicopters they can go in and help people and come here and there, whereas these jets are only good for war, large distances far away from here. So even within the military, these militaries are telling us this. It is, of course, the industry that is has got a hold of the foreign. No, I would say the federal government. But there's something else I want to say about this.
Let me add to that just quickly. The industry and NATO. I think that NATO, that is the intention. So I know your comment is right.
We aren't paying enough. We should, we have to pay more. That's what they've been saying.
Yeah, and they have to contribute those warships and so on.
Two things have happened to shake a bit Canadians' view of foreign policy. One was that twice they lost the opportunity to be on the Security Council. Now, maybe it's only policy wonks like me that got this, but it was in all the papers. Now, this is telling because I would say 2-3 decades ago, 3 maybe more, you could not find a UN, panel, a UN commission, a UN group that did not have a Canadian in it. Canadians were considered honest brokers, some time ago. We lost all that. That's gone. Okay. No. Nobody considers Canada an honest broker of anything. So that's lost. And Canada could have, become a champion of the United Nations if it followed that. But something happened during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I saw my premier, my completely right-wing premier in Ontario, go nuts because the United States wouldn't send us the masks that we needed. Okay, how could this be? That because Canada wasn't producing the masks, and not only that, they stopped the masks that it had bought, and then all of a sudden, ordinary Canadians were saying, "Oh, these are supposed to be our friends. What do you mean they're not going to send us masks?" It was such an eye-opening to people. The other thing that was eye-opening during the pandemic was that south of the border, it was chaos down there. people demonstrating on the streets, taking the Capitol, not using the mask, saying the vaccines were going to give you AIDS. I mean, no, we're not going to take the vaccines. I mean, it was chaos, and the epicenter, people being dying. They didn't have places to put the bodies. I mean, here in Canada, we're watching from right up close the disaster that was in the United States. This, I speak with a lot of people, and a lot of people who I would never dreamed would have said this about the United States were absolutely horrified at the institutional debacle, about the lack of political control and disaster in the United States. So now, for the first time, and I've been living here for over 40 years, for the first time, I hear ordinary Canadians actually criticizing the United States and its government and its people and what it stands for, and that it has not been a good neighbor to Canada. So the epicenter has been eye-opening to Canadians.
So we cannot have a hope in the left in Canada. So we better bet on the indigenous movement.
No, we always have hope, and we're going to go out there. We're going to campaign. There's some valuable people, within the NDP, and even some valuable people within the Liberal government. None in the Conservatives. Okay, forget the Conservatives. I'm not going to campaign for any of those. But right now there's no movement. Is what I'm saying. There's no huge movement except amongst the indigenous people.
I will make an exception to that, Maria. I think, first of all, to emphasize, I think Jesus initiated that about the leftist movement. Leftists or no leftists, I think we have a good bunch of people, political analysts in this country, that really spell out the imperial ideology of the Canadian government. Yves Engler, for one, I admire that guy because he's so outspoken, and he has written so much about imperialism, Canadian foreign policy. And I think that, in fact, he's probably the most, he has written so much that sometimes it's difficult even trying to read everything by him. But think also of Aidan Jonah, we know him very well. Yes. Arnold August, very prolific writer as well. Joe Emmesberger, I mean, incredibly, Justin Pudor. So I think we have great people. Now, is this a moment? No, I don't think I can call it a moment. You are right. But I think we have, because imperialism has always existed in Canada. Okay, let's not think that imperialism is new and it's just recent with whatever Harper or Trudeau and so on. Imperialism in Canada already exists. In fact, if Yves Engler would be listening to this, he would totally agree. Imperialism in Canada is very, very old, as this country is almost. What makes a big difference, but now it's running on testosterone. Imperialism in Canada now is running on testosterone. We have one example, in fact, that relates to us and to the topic we're discussing, which is Venezuela, ultimately. And that is the Canadian overt imperialism on Venezuela started, in fact, recently, started to trace back to 2015, 2017, when it started. But you know how it started? It started through an agreement, a written, signed agreement between the government of Canada and the government of the United States in August 2017. That agreement was only directed to Venezuela. That was the goal. The goal was regime change in Venezuela. In September of the same year, 2017, the Canadian government issues the first sanctions against Venezuela. So I think that gives an example. First of all, the overt imperialism of the Canadian government that started recently, and secondly, the Canadian imperialism is very closely tied to the master imperialist, the imperial by excellence, the United States government. So I think those two things have to be made very clear. I wanted to briefly also mention, if you allow me, just other examples at the geopolitical level, which is, the continuous attacks now from the Canadian government against Russia and China. This to me is just a confirmation of what I just said. The US is imposing sanctions and is having a rhetoric, warmongering even attacks against China and Russia. Canada compliantly goes along with that fully. So that to me also shows the engagement between these two governments. But in terms of a movement or no movement against imperialism and Canadian foreign policy in Canada, let's not forget one major win that Canadians had in this country against imperialism. That was when the movement to ask not to vote for Canada at the UN Security Council seat. And that was a tremendous win. And I believe that Canadians had a lot to do with that, not only international, other countries and other votes at the UN, but I think Canadians had a lot to do. We should not forget that win against imperialism in Canada, and maybe just project that and start saying, Canada step out of NATO and hands off Venezuela.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
All the people that you mentioned are all my friends. We're such a small community. We all know each other. And I have the greatest respect for Yves and Justin and Joe. I mean, they are fantastic. But I have to tell you, it's us that know them. What I want is I want to see their writing in the Globe and Mail. I want to see their writing in the Toronto Star. I'm sorry to say this. I gave up trying to write to the CBC, to the Globe and Mail, to the Star. I gave up after years of either no thank you or just being ignored. So our voices are not heard in the mainstream media, and they're not heard by the ordinary Canadians. Look, in the article I sent you, my latest article, I talk about the good people of Canada. I can't tell you how much I love Canada and Canadians, all my friends, my family, my children, my grandchildren, they're all Canadian. They're such good people. I have to say it, and I do. I say this is a wonderful people and country. But they don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on because we have such a secretive government, especially when it comes to foreign affairs. And something that Nino said, actually, I've written about that. The link between domestic policy and foreign policy is very, very close, only they cloak it. There's a cloak over it. And so we have a huge problem. This is one thing I wanted to ask you, Jesus. How can we get the Orinoco Tribune? The work that you do in the Orinoco Tribune is so utterly important and essential and fantastic. You have done. I'm not trying to halagarte, flatter you. I'm telling you truly, you have filled an enormous gap here. And of course, I go around telling all my friends who only know English, you gotta read Orinoco Tribune, because when I speak about Venezuela to many people, I'm talking about intelligent people, educated people. And I say, oh no, in Venezuela, such as, they say to me, I didn't know that. Where did you get that? I haven't read that in the papers. I haven't heard the CBC say this. And they all think like I'm a half crazy woman, you know, this crazy woman. She's saying these things that I've never heard of this before. Why? Because we need to get all of these voices of these wonderful people that we know in our community. We've got to break the la guerra mediática, the media
warfare
war against us, you know. And until that happens, I'm sorry, we're talking to ourselves, you know, and we, this to me is the greatest thing that we, as a left, we have to do. We got to break this media. You know, in Canada, Jesus, the main newspapers in Canada, not one has a reporter in Venezuela. But boy, do they write about Venezuela. And you know where they get the stuff? They get it through Reuters. They get it through the United States.
Or AP, yes.
And you know why? Because it's cheaper. They don't have to put a man down there or a woman. Oh no, they get it all bottled up and fixed up with a ribbon on it from the Americans. And that's what they publish here, you know? So we do not have an independent media in Canada. Everything gets canned here from the United States. And this is part of Canada not having sovereignty, having sovereignty. So it's very sad, but this is one of the things that we need to do. And how are we going to do that? How can we break out of our community? It's not enough that we have brilliant people writing. We have to get this message out to the ordinary Canadians who, if they knew what Canada has done to Venezuela, that 100,000 Venezuelans died because they did not have medicines. Heaven knows how many died before we got the vaccines, that Canada is culpable of this. If they knew that, they would be horrified, just like they're horrified right now about the Indigenous people. So
that's true.
Yeah, we have great people, but not enough people are listening to us.
I want to jump to the third question. I want to jump to the third question because we're running out of time, but I really feel what you say, and I feel honored that you value the work we do. And also I believe that from your comments one can interpret that what is needed maybe is first maybe trying to get a connection between, you know, the hardcore groups of leftists, activists, intellectuals, writers in Canada, and try to create these connections with the indigenous movement, for example. No, but not a like spontaneous connections like those ones that happen when there's a burst of violence or, you know, attacks against indigenous people. Something that needs to be worked with a plan, with an objective, with goals. So that might be our out of the words that you have been saying, the things that you have been saying, that might be our contribution to the left people in Canada, and also doing that, we might jump to the other, you know, recommendation from us to the left in Canada, which might be also how to galvanize or how to unite around like a media project that represent. I believe that the Canada Files that Aidan runs is a good project. It's very new. Not too many people knows the Canada Files yet, but I believe that in 1 year they have achieved a lot. So I'm very positive about the work that they are doing, and I hope that maybe more Canadian progressive people join the project and support the Canada Files in the work that they do. So that might be the, you know, I'm trying to summarize what you say, and I want to jump to the third question.
Okay, go ahead.
What might be Canada's new aggressions against the Bolivarian Revolution? What do you think is going to happen between Canada and Venezuela in the coming months?
Oh, well,
You go, Maria.
Christopher Freeland is not there anymore, but it doesn't matter who's there. They're going to follow whatever policy the United States has. I don't see any kind of change happening there. We have Biden, and Biden, you know, he takes one step forward and 3 steps backwards, but he has not essentially changed very much. And I don't think Trudeau is going to do anything at all. I mean, he didn't do anything against Trump. Trump insulted him personally, every which way. He insulted Canada, and he insulted the person of the Prime Minister of Canada. And Justin Trudeau bowed his head and said, "Thank you very much. I have to take this because the economy is the most important thing." And we have to get this idea out of Canada, that they think that they're protecting the Canadian economy, and what they're doing is sinking it into even more and more dependency on the United States, and less autosufficiency and you know, more different things that Canada could do. How can it be that this country that has such a highly educated and trained population could not produce masks, and could not produce oxygen tanks, and could not produce
Vaccines, no vaccines.
no vaccines? Cuba produced vaccines. Huh? So this idea that Canada is becoming more and more dependent on the United States is something that we really have to work on. And I think that Venezuela is becoming more and more a challenge to Canada because of this, because Venezuela is showing in its way, it's a poor country. It's not that it's, you know, advancing in tremendous ways, but Venezuela has shown a dignity and a will to stand on its own 2 feet, which Canada has not shown. So I think that Canada is going to continue the same aggression, and it's going to be led by the gold diggers, the gold mining gold here, which is very powerful, Barrick Gold and all of those. They want the gold fields of Venezuela more than the oil, because the oil is more like a competitor of Venezuela, right? And just remember, the oil of Canada is owned by the United States, unlike the gold. But almost everything to do with oil in Alberta is in the hands of the United States. They even have the product, and Canada even thinks that it can't even refine it and make all the other things that can be made out of petroleum. It's still in this attitude that, you know, we take the natural resources and then we send it over there and they turn it into whatever. So I think we're still going to see a Canada being aggressive against Venezuela, unfortunately, until something happens in the United States, because Canada is not independent. It follows what the United States is going to be doing.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I think not right now, but I think the United States is truly in a period of the disintegration of its empire, and we see that geopolitically with what Nino has talked about, the geopolitics of China and Russia is really advancing in leaps and bounds, much more than I imagined. The latest is that Russia has said to NATO, I'm going to blind all of your satellites. I'm going to blow your satellites out of space if you continue trying to put Ukraine into NATO. This is a very serious thing, but it seems like the United States doesn't have that capability. This is a big issue right now, and I think that the fact that China and Russia have been, no matter what you may think of them, they have been the ones to show international solidarity during the pandemic, not only to Venezuela, but to so many countries. It has been, of course, Cuba, but these two big maligned countries that you open a newspaper or listen to the radio in Canada, it's always the bad guys. Huh? They are the ones who have really shown incredible humanity and solidarity to Venezuela, of course, and to many, many poor countries, and are right now championing the vaccines to be made available to many countries. So I think that the new geopolitics is being drawn. And when that happens, you're going to see Canada leaving the sinking ship. and then they will, be less dependent on the United States. But that's not going to happen tomorrow.
Go ahead, Nino.
Yeah, thanks again, Maria, for your analysis. Yeah, I think your issue of the gold and resources in Venezuela, obviously that is the ultimate motivation for the aggression, for the Canadian aggression on the Bolivarian Revolution. That is clear. I still like to look at the sort of the broader picture. And I mentioned, for instance, just earlier, how the US and Canada have signed this agreement in August 2017. That was specifically on Venezuela, but I think it does, in fact, address the political, situation or circumstances around that. I've been following that for quite some time now, and I've come to this conclusion. At the time of signing that agreement in 2017, the US and Canada must have sat at the table, and said, okay, how are we going to split? How are we going to topple the Bolivarian Revolution? And so how are we going to do that? How are we going to split our work? And that's when they came up with this specialized roles in doing that. They basically divided the task and say, okay, we do this, you do that. What they decided to do? Well, the US is strong on what? War down, military, financial power, and so on and so forth. We are the empire. And they continue with that. They took on their role. That's what they've been doing. And they will continue doing that. But they needed a soft power, to align, to be, well, no, exactly. Oh, obviously, no, it's just as harmful, Maria. Of course, we know that. But as appearing to be a softer power. And so what was Canada's role? Create and later rise or become the leader of the Lima Group, which is herding all those little countries, right-wing countries and governments in Latin America and the Caribbean, of course. And by that, I don't want to diminish the people. I'm talking about the governments of those countries. Understand that. So basically, that's what the role of Canada has been. And so we have seen the Lima Group, which, by the way, now is sort of vanishes and disappearing. We knew that long before this is happening. So that has been the division of labor between Canada and the US. So now, of course, the question, Jesus' question is quite valid. So what is Canada going to do now that, all of a sudden, the opposition is participating in Venezuela, is participating in the elections, and many Latin American countries, including Honduras, recently, in fact, is joining the Patria Grande. When all this is, what is Canada going to do? Lima Group is no longer. Guaido is disappearing. Who is Canada going to support next? Okay, but it's a difficult to answer that question. I think what we have to think is, will Canada become more aggressive, losing its soft power role and becoming more aggressive like the US? Will it provide support to mercenary groups in Venezuela, in Colombia? I mean, Canada's role in the world has been providing all this support locally, bringing the police, the training, and so on and so forth, the supplies that were needed to train, local people. I wouldn't be surprised if Canada would suddenly start supporting the mercenary training groups in Colombia. Or will Canada play a softer role, even softer role, in view of the recent support of Venezuela? The Venezuelan government received at the UN, as you mentioned, Maria. So I think that more realistically, these are questions that we cannot answer immediately. We have to see, again, you mentioned that, Maria, we have to see what the US is going to dictate. I think Canada and the US are probably sitting at the table right now trying to, hash out and see what they're going to do next. So more realistically, I believe that with concerns about China and Russia, that much more important in Canada's foreign relation, Canada will just wait for instructions from the US. So we will have to see what the US is going to say.
That's quite, very good analysis, Nino. And I would just add, it isn't just the US. A lot will depend on what radical Democrats in Congress say, because if it's still the liberals in government, they will be listening more to that Democratic caucus in the United States. We're going to have elections in Canada anytime now. We've been talking, and I, thinking that Trudeau is going to continue. It would be much worse if the Conservatives win. It really will be almost game over if the present fellow who leads the Conservatives, O'Toole, wins. I don't think he will, because I think that Trudeau still has a hold on the Liberal Party, because after all, he brought it back from near death, okay? The Liberals were practically off the specter, and because he's a guy with tremendous charisma, okay, he brought the Liberals back into power. Unfortunately, he would have been a perfect Governor General. The Governor General of Venezuela, in Canada, represents the Queen. They do nothing except, look good. So Trudeau would have been the perfect Governor General. Unfortunately, we have him as Prime Minister, but he is infinitely better than if the Conservatives win. So let us see what happens in the next election, which I hope isn't too soon.
I would just mention briefly that the reason I always speak of the US government, and I don't spell out the different groups and whatnot, is because I do not trust any branch of government or groups, even when they speak up about, these progressive, I don't trust them at all. So I don't refer to them. There's no point. There's nothing to learn from that. And we have seen that happening. We have seen, the Sanders syndrome, who has been destroyed. We have seen, I forget the name, Ocasio, exactly. I was just thinking of that.
I didn't
none of that.
I didn't mean in terms of that I trusted any of them, but I want to know what their movement is, what their action.
But when you mention that, let me jump in, guys. But when
that's what
you
I wanna
mentioned the bad conservatives in the U.S. Congress, immediately came to my mind the image of, you know, those cartoons where you know that the ones actually running the puppets are the corporations at the end of the day, and that happened with Democrats or Republicans, even good Democrats or bad Democrats, and socialist Democrats, and at the end of the day, those are the ones that are imposing the, you know, the narrative, the script, and giving the orders to those guys that they see as their employees.
But it's not,
Right?
Jesus, you have
not
the
behind
wrong.
the scenes, Jesus. They passed a law in the United
Of
States
course.
that says corporations can donate as much as they want to politicians. This doesn't happen in Canada, okay? In Canada, there's a cap on all of that. If a politician has received $1 million from, you know, a corporation, he'd be in deep trouble. But in the United States, it's openly that the corporations run it.
Yes.
In Canada, we have to be a bit more sort of circumspect and look underneath the rug to see if there's any money underneath the rug. But it's not allowed here. The United States is in deep, tremendous democratic crises right now, because for years they have had bipartisan unity. You know, it didn't really matter, you know, Republicans, Democrats, particularly in with respect to the world and all of that. Right now, there's a huge polarization. This you cannot miss. If you watch anything on TV, you see that they really are at each other's throats. If they could, they'd kill each other, you know. They truly are a huge division between Republicans and Democrats, within the Republicans and within the Democrats. So they're fighting tooth and nail. It really is a democratic crisis that I don't know how they're going to get out. This is happening.
It's going to explode in 2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
it's going to be a mess, actually.
You know, Maria, I have to add something to what you said. Yeah, you see the polarization, but actually what comes to mind for me is, you know, I call that actually, I don't see the polarization as you see it, but I trust you that there is, obviously there is, but at the same time, when it comes to a crunch, they stick together. And you know what this reminds me of? I call that actually US punto fijismo. This for me, that reminds me of Ade and Copey, you know, in the Cuarta República. Ade and Copey, punto fijismo. They took turns. Oh yeah, they bickered, of course. And then at some point, yes, they did have also their, you know, further divisions and so on and so forth. But that wasn't until Chavez came on board. So where is Chavez in the US?
We need a Chavez in Canada.
El punto fijismo destroyed itself, okay? And so I am saying that this is part of the United States destroying itself, okay? Because we haven't seen this before. We haven't seen this level of political conflict before within there. So
polarization.
And if you read anything by Chris Hedges, please read Chris Hedges, who's one of the greatest commentators right now on the disintegration of the United States. This is one of the things that he talks about, the polarization that's happening there. It's more than polarization. It really is conflicts of interest that have come up finally, and they're looking at it straight away, and with no morals, with no ethics, you know, with no principles anymore, you know.
You know, is it?
Let me jump to the fourth question, guy, please.
Okay.
This is the last one. How do you see Venezuela and Chavismo in 22?
Let me start with that one, Maria. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I just, you know, because I've been thinking about that, and in fact, I even took some notes because I knew what was coming after the elections and so on and so forth. So mentally, I was preparing, trying to write up something. Yeah. So basically, in my view, generally speaking, I think Chavismo remains strong, and that's what we have just said, at the very beginning with the elections of November 21st. Now, I am also inclined to believe that Guaido, and we also refer to this, basically will vanish. We're referring specifically at the 2022. We don't know beyond that, but I think that would be the most immediate thing that would happen. And Guaido will vanish as a leading political figure. It would be replaced by somebody else. Now, the main issue that will pop up in 2022, in my view, is in fact a revocation referendum. That will be, in my view, in my analysis, the main issues that we'll be dealing with in Venezuela. A group, in fact, has already announced, and they're already preparing the process to start the referendum in Venezuela to revoke, of course, Nicolas Maduro. Now, thinking about this, and so I went and tried to look and understand what the Venezuelan Constitution says about that. Venezuelan Constitution has two main articles that deal with that, and they will sort of spell out some of the things that might lead to further analysis. Article 72 of the Venezuelan Constitution basically says that a recall petition can be initiated as soon as January 10, 2022. Also in a few weeks, basically the process can be started, because that is the half point of Maduro's presidency, okay? And this is according to Article 72, cannot be changed. Now, then there are two options there based on Article 233. One is, if the recall succeeds by January 9, 2023, that is a year later, then a new election must be held within 30 days. And the vice president at that point will fill in for those during those 30 days, but there will be an election. Now, if the recall succeeds after January 9, 2023, then there will be only 2 years remaining of Maduro's presidency, which means, according to the Constitution, again, that the vice president, which will be Delcy Rodriguez, will take charge until the end of the term, which will be December 2024. So this is basically on the layout in terms of the timeline for the referendum. This is very important, and I'm going to give a concluding statement about that. But in terms of the how the recall referendum will succeed or can succeed, we have to look again at Article 72. The petition has to be signed at least by 20% of the registered voters. Okay, I have not made the calculation how many voters. It's 20%. That will come up. Will be clear. Now there's a slight controversy here, and I will advance to that, which is that this group that's calling for a recall, they want to include Venezuelans who are abroad. That would be us, Maria. Okay, that's they expect to include that. That's not that easy. Okay, why? Because for instance, the Canadian government has not allowed us to vote in 2018, they would have the galls now to say, oh yes, we will allow Venezuelans to vote for the referendum. Okay, I'll leave that.
Terrible.
Let me
Let us
finish.
vote. Because most of the Venezuelans here are escuálidos. That would be crazy.
Let me finish that. So now the number of voters in favor of recall will have to be equal or higher than the initial voters who voted for Maduro in 2018. That's where the voters from Venezuelans outside, because they did not vote in 2018. If they vote now, that's not the same roster, the same number of voters that we're talking about. So that's going to be tricky. And finally, 25% or more turn out to vote on the referendum. So that's according to the Constitution. Okay. So now the big question, to me, the bigger question, on top of the one that I already mentioned, the controversy that's going to arise, about details. Will the Venezuelans abroad vote or not vote, and so on. Aside from that, we have a very crucial problem, or the opposition has, not us, which is, they have to decide. First of all, the time frame is 1 year. They have to win the referendum recall in 1 year, in 2023, because after that, they lose the opportunity of a new election, because Desi Rodriguez will be the president until the end of the term. So they have to win it within 1 year. Now, within this year, they have to make a big jump, which is who's going to be their candidate, presidential candidate, for the supposed election happening if they win the recall. Okay, so now I already said that
Sit down and wait for that one.
Imagine that kind of
come up with that just like this, huh?
Imagine.
Each other's throats.
So that Guaido's gonna be out. So who do we have? Julio Borges. Okay, he's actually wait. No, I'm not supporting him. What I'm saying, this is what the opposition. This is what the opposition would have the options.
He can't come back to Venezuela, Borges.
He cannot. He's exactly. He's a fugitive. Now the other fugitive,
because he killed a young boy. Okay,
that's something. Maybe that's why they are pushing so hard this resuming of the Mexico talks. By the way, maybe they just want to have some new pardons from the government in order to allow their people, their possible presidential candidates, to be allowed to run. So that might be it, because I've been wondering myself why they have been pushing so much in recent weeks to resume, and they went to the US and they met with Nuland there, and you say, wow, these guys are pushing too much for negotiations when they were the ones that initially didn't want to go to the table.
This is
strange,
the thing.
right?
Now,
I just want to add
some
crazy thought that came to my mind when you were speaking, Nino.
The opposition all of a sudden, wants to appear as to be this, peaceful group that want, all the best for Venezuelans and so on and so forth, which, as you are suggesting, it's ridiculous, totally. Okay, they don't have.
Cacao, como decimos nosotros. Están pidiendo cacao. They are now realizing that they have to come cap in hand to ask something to Maduro, and this is what they're doing. And Maduro, fortunately, said, "The hell with you! I'm not going to Mexico."
Yeah.
Of course. Why? What has he got to win? We've done the elections. The real opposition are the three governors of those three states. Those are the ones I'm going to deal with. All of you, what did they do? They did the worst possible thing. they went and met with that Nuland woman. Huh?
Mm.
Why would Maduro, legitimize that? No, that was a big mistake.
Yeah, that was a big mistake. And hopefully he will not repeat that, when it comes to, Julio Borges and Leopoldo Lopez and so on, which, might well be the opposition's hope in, as Jesus is suggesting, in continue with the talks in Mexico. I think they must have their own sort of little cloud, and they're sort of trying to figure out and imagine how that's going to work out. So I think, again, going back, I think my conclusion on that topic is that the referendum is going to be, the recall referendum is going to be the major topic coming up next year. So anyway, I think that we will have a chance to talk about this even more, I'm assuming.
That's a very good analysis of what could happen with this, but I hope you know that Interlaces has just done a poll very recently, which says that more than 60% of Venezuelans want Maduro to finish his term. So there may not be enough people who really care very much about this revocatorio. And another thing is, with Chavez, people hated him or loved him. He was such an amazing, wonderful, incredible guy. But there were some people who really, truly hated him, Maduro doesn't give that impression. So there isn't, I think, enough hate against Maduro. And then the other thing which I think is, these people on the opposition are completely inept. They can't get their act together. The thought that the different oppositions are going to come together for a revocatoria, I don't know. They can do it, but it's going to take them a long time. But I tell you, my point of view, I think something really important is going to happen in 2022, and that is that the economy is getting better. I think this is going to be so important. Credit Suisse has said that there's going to be a 5.5% increase. Imagine an increase, okay, in GDP in Venezuela next year. This is huge. This is as if they'd said, 60% compared to where we are, because we're way down here. So 2% means, a noticeable increase in the production in Venezuela. This is a great win for all the impetus for diversification that for years the Maduro government has been pushing. Now, of course, is a question of survival, and they've done a great deal. I can't believe that Venezuela is producing drones. Venezuela actually produced planes. There are, domestic planes that are produced in Venezuela. This has never ever happened in Venezuela.
Yeah.
So there is a huge diversification. The other thing is that more than 90% of the food that is consumed in Venezuela is grown in Venezuela. This is huge in Venezuela. We used to import, caraotas, everything, rice and everything. And all the boxes of the clap boxes, the food boxes, it's all products of Venezuela. So those three things, the diversification, the food security, they've been able to sell many of the resources. And all of this was because of some laws that Maduro was able to pass, that some people on the left went, oh, this is terrible, this is imperialism, this is capitalism, whatever. Most countries are very secretive about many of the economic things that they do and deals that they make. In Venezuela, it was all, oh, look what I'm doing. Hey, look, tomorrow I'm going to speak with so-and-so. This is what we've been doing. And Maduro's government said, look, we're complete idiots. We need to do all kinds of economic deals, but we have to do it under the radar, because if not, the Americans are going to get us and the sanctions are going to get us. And the idiots on the left in Venezuela were going on about, oh, capitalism and all this kind of nonsense. That's because they didn't have the responsibility of feeding the population, which is Maduro had. Maduro had to feed this population, had to get this country going. So I think 2022 is going to be pivotal because of the good economic, visible changes that we're going to see. And the other thing which I think is going to happen in 2022, we're going to get more allies. We're going to have elections in Chile, hopefully. We're going to have elections in Brazil. We're going to have, hopefully, elections in Ecuador sometime. We've got Nicaragua, we've got Honduras. Every now and again, it's growing, the number of allies that Venezuela has within the region. And of course, the allies, the great allies of Russia and China, who have helped us so much with that diversification. They haven't gone in there to say, oh, buy Russian this and buy Chinese that. These people have been in there trying to help us so that we can diversify and we can build the kind of things that we can do. So I expect a year of much better economy, and that's always good for the government. I expect that there will be a revocatory, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And the one thing that I'm worried about, this I would ask Jesus what he thinks about. I'm furious of the impunidad, the impunity. I want to see Guaido behind jail. You know, I want to see the, you know, not the FBI, this international criminal court put Leopoldo Lopez in jail. I want to see Borges in the criminal court. I want to see Vecchio, all of those scoundrels. I want to see them in the international court, and I don't know why the government isn't doing this. That's my complaint of the Maduro government. Come on, Maduro, ponte duro. We want behind jail, because in no country in the world would they be walking around free.
Please don't start a movement on that, Maria.
Yes, we feel you, Maria. That's true. I mean, it's absolutely true what you say. And I believe that summarizing what you have said, that yes, I mean, the recall referendum is something that has been, you know, talked about a lot in recent days in Venezuela. And I agree with Maria that it's going to be very, very uphill for the right wingers to make something out of the collecting of signatures and then, you know, deciding candidates, and it's going to be very hard. And it's nice the way you put it, you know, in constitutional terms, because I didn't do that homework, and it's always important to check the deadlines that the Constitution imposed, because in this crazy dictatorship we have in Venezuela, we try to follow what the Constitution says. So anyway, I believe that we have reached the end of the interview, the first part at least, and now is your chance to ask me a couple of questions. So feel free to throw it.
Well, my first question to you, Jesus, I said before, what do you think that Orinoco Tribune, which has been so fantastic, how can we get you into the mainstream? How can we get more other media to you know, publish what you publish? How can we get you, and how can we help to get you out there more?
It's a complicated question. It's hard. I believe that out of the quality of our work that we try to impose in everything we do, people has been, you know, recognizing Orinoco Tribune, not only in the US and Canada, but in other countries, even in Venezuela, which I did not think about when I you know, envisioned the project at the beginning. I was just thinking on trying to get the, you know, the audience in the North to know a bit better about the things that will happen in Venezuela and about the things that we talk about in Venezuela, because sometimes people believe that nothing happened here, or that what happened is what the mainstream media says. So anyway, I never saw about Venezuelans reading Orinoco Tribune, and I believe that Venezuela is like among the 10 countries that read Orinoco Tribune the most, which is pretty interesting because I'm on the impression that English speaking Venezuelans are not too many around there. So anyway, but those numbers are there is you know, surprising for us. So in that sense, how to, you know, jump from there and make it more visible, it will depend on our audience first, you know, and our audience is spreading the word as you guys do a lot, you, Nino and Maria and too many others, but also in supporting Orinoco Tribune. I hate to talk about the financial support, disregarding that we from time to time, at least twice a year, try to push towards fundraising, but it's important because we are fighting like with nails. What the mainstream media is doing. I mean, you know, if you compare a few progressive outlets out there that are trying to do something, you know, to promote leftist socialist ideas, and you compare that with that mainstream is doing, I mean, we are like down here, you know, over there, and the mainstream is up there with all the money, with all the resources, all the technology, all the support of the corporations. So it's like, it's complicated. The other day I have a meeting with some good friends that came from the US and Canada, by the way, that came to the Venezuelan elections. And we talk about that. And they also asked me something similar to your question, Maria. And somehow this crazy idea came to my mind about the importance of our friends in the US to try to organize themselves, trying not to support Orinoco Tribune alone. I mean, try to create some sort of organization, group, network, whatever you want to call it, in the US and Canada, and maybe Europe, where most of the resources are, and trying to push towards raising funds for independent news outlet out there, progressive news outlets like Orinoco Tribune, but also like, I don't know, Causachun News, Min Press, the Green Zone. There are many other projects that are at the Canada Files, you know, that are in need of resources, because we are basically working with
We can't hear you.
Yeah, the voice is gone. Image is frozen.
Yeah, me too. Jesus.
Yes. Yeah, connection from Venezuela. That's
I think he knows that something's gone wrong.
oh yeah, no, I'm sure he knows. Yeah. There. Oh,
Oh no, he's gone. You are the host now. No, I'm not the host.
you are the host. Maybe you have to bring him in.
No, it says participants, just you and me. Oh, chat.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can say something to chat. Oh, here's coming. He's
Oh,
coming.
there. It's coming back.
Ah, no oyes. No oyes. No te oigo. No te oigo.
Give me 1 second. Do you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I knew that this might happen because in recent weeks the internet has been like bumpy, not like all the time, but you know, like what happened right now. But the other day it happened when we had this panel with for the anniversary that we organized last week. But let me do something here. Anyway, the recording is gonna match everything. Do you hear me better now?
I can hear you better.
No?
Yep.
Now I can hear you.
Okay.
That's
I
good.
have
Okay,
a
okay.
recommendation for you. I don't know
Wow.
how to do it, but I am often called by community radios in the United States. They have an incredible network all over the United States. These little humble community radios who are, quite progressive. I'm always being called by these different radios, and they are the most progressive thing in the United States right now is the community radio. And you are doing a program like this, which is verbal, and it would be the kind of a program that these radio
I'd be interested in.
like.
Yes, that's a good idea. That's
It
absolutely good.
would be fabulous because it wouldn't cost you anything. Basically, it's
Yes.
just like you don't have to invest in anything. You just tell.
And it will expand our reach.
I will send you some names of some of the community radios that have
That's fine.
because now I have a partner because I have been producing the program Venezuela Viva for many years here in Canada. The only radio program fully on Venezuela has been Venezuela Viva on the community radio, and now I have a partner, which is Nino. So Nino is now helping me with this.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
So the both of us now are doing Venezuela Viva. And as I said, I have these names of these different radio programs, and believe me, they are all over the United States. I've got some are Black radios, people from the Black community calling me, some from
also.
Indigenous, and they are very, very radical, and they want to hear all about the Venezuelan revolution. So I'm going to send them to you, and maybe you can send them an email.
And also, whenever you are in contact with them, just let them know that if they wish to use our content, they can reach us, and we can also, try to coordinate with them how to let them, have a hand on the content we create. I just want to let you know that we are back to live on Facebook since the moment we reconnected. But that's a good idea. But going back to the moment when I got cut out, I just wanted to round up the idea that I was mentioning before that, which was this network in which we might have like different, like these organizations that we know in the US and that I know that they should exist also in Canada, like the Alliance for Global Justice or the Alliance for the Task Force for the Americas, and maybe other organizations like that might be part of this network that could reach potential contributors, but big ones, not the small ones, like businesses, progressive businesses in the US and Canada and Europe, that they might want also to have some ads in our websites or in our radio shows or the podcast or whatever. And maybe that way, I know that it's not a simple task, but I believe that will be the most organic way to raise funds in the North to help in a more organic way progressive outlets like Orinoco Tribune and the other one that I mentioned you before being called out. So that might be the answer to the question, Maria. My answer to your question is something connected to that, but your suggestion is great, and I really would love if you put me in contact with that people that you know, because I know that those radio stations exist in the US, and while I was living in Chicago, I was also at least interviewed once a month from one of those radio stations. Like I have lost track on them, if you ask me. So whatever you provide to me will be great.
That's a good idea. I related to what you mentioned about getting back to Facebook and so on. I'm very active on social media, Facebook and Twitter and Telegram and so on. And I'm always scouting and searching and so on. But and I know that you're there, especially on Telegram. I see all these tweets that come out, you know, Orinoco Tribune on Twitter, you know, and there again. So I know what comes out, you know, just following that. But the question is, do you have a sense of what is the most effective way? Like, you know, if I read an article on the Orinoco Tribune, I immediately send it to Facebook and I try to tag as many people as I can and so on and so forth. Same with Twitter. But do you have a sense, or do you have a feedback for yourself in terms of which one is the most effective and you know,
Yes,
how
absolutely.
to enhance that? Because I would be happy to, you know, push that, you know, if I know it's
Yes.
going in the proper, correct direction.
That's a good question. You know, we have. I mean, we can see at least in terms of the number of clicks that we have in our website, we can see on a daily basis where those clicks came from. So if you ask me precisely, I can tell you without hesitation that Facebook is the biggest source of social, you know, network clicks in Orinoco Tribune. Then in second place, you might have Twitter. No, you have, I'm sure of that. You have Twitter in second place. And then it might be a mix of Reddit, this this social media that not too many of us use, but that is used a lot in the US by young people, especially. So Reddit might be, Reddit and LinkedIn might be the third and fourth place in terms of clicks coming for social networks to Orinoco Tribune. But again, I mean, the difference between Facebook and Twitter is considerable. And from Twitter to the third and fourth place is like bigger.
What about
So
Telegram?
that not that much, not that much. I mean, but we don't have too many followers. That's also a problem that we have. We haven't found a way to. I mean, we created that channel in Telegram like 2 years ago or 1 year and a half ago, but we don't have too many followers there. And what I wonder sometimes is how to, you know, make that audience bigger, but I didn't found yet a way to do so. But there should be tricks, but sometimes, most of the time, I'm running out of time, you know, trying to do all the things that are need to be done to keep Orinoco Tribune alive. So sometimes I'm just like with no energy to keep digging and finding more stuff. So any recommendations that you might have, Nino, that I know that you are very active in social networks, is welcome. And also going back to the social networks, social media platforms, I believe that you know, hierarchy in a ranking of clicks from social media platforms it depends a lot on the number of people within those platforms. You know that, and according to, I remember that once I was talking with Ben Norton from the Grey Zone, and he was saying that I mean, basically a lot of people, especially the youth, say that Facebook is for all people and everything, but the reality is that Facebook is the social media platform that have the biggest audience, the biggest numbers. So we cannot neglect, and that's might be the reason why we have so many clicks coming from Facebook and Twitter. So a lot of people say, no, you have to go to the Russian VK and to these other, you know, platform like Mastodons. And I mean, there are a zillion of, you know, social media platforms are there that are marginal, and some people sometimes say that we have to go there, but the reality is that if we want to let our message be visible for the bigger audiences, we have to prioritize Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We try to do also a work in Instagram. We are try to be very active in Instagram, but we don't receive too many clicks from Instagram neither. So it's a complicated scenario.
I have another.
Go ahead.
No, another question that's related to that. because I see on your website, on the Orinoco Tribune website, I see Alexa, that you report on that, which you know, it seems sort of gives an idea of your ranking. I'm assuming, right? I don't know if you understand that correctly, but
yes.
if you would explain that, how that works, and also if you could suggest maybe, is there a way of influencing Alexa so
There are
to
some
show
tricks
up?
actually.
Aha, that's what I want to hear.
I mean, yes, first of all, Alexa is a ranking that has been there for more, I believe that like for at least 15 or 20 years to measure the websites worldwide. So they give a sense on how relevant a website is. So in that sense, we are proud and we initially monitor Alexa by ourselves, but a few months ago, a friend of us from Chicago, by the way, told us, but why don't you put something in the website that, you know, keep the people being informed about your Alexa rank? Because I know that you do it on Facebook from time to time, or that you post something about it in Twitter or something like that, but why don't you put it in the website for people to, you know, realize that you are like a relevant website, and we are proud of that actually, because we have been moving in 3 years to a rank that is very close. I believe that right now we're better ranked than the Common Dreams, for example, or very close to the Intercept, which is very mainstream for liberal websites. We are for months already better ranked than Democracy Now, the website, I mean, and things like that. I mean, and in comparison with Venezuelan websites, we are way better than many. I believe that the only one that is better than us is Últimas Noticias, that I believe that they are in the 20,000, I mean, the 20K rank, and we are just right now entering the 30K, I mean, which is amazing. And we were happy a few days ago when we finally, after several months, entered into the 30K rank. But that's to give you an idea of the how the website is moving, and that depends. I mean, that ranking depends on several things. Depend on the clicks, of course, of the website. Depends on the backlinks of websites linking to pieces that has been posted in Orinoco Tribune. So that's so some websites design a strategy. We never have done that because I believe that that's unfair competition. I mean, there are people or some businesses and websites that they build that backlink. You know, they ask other websites to put links or hyperlinks to your website in order to the website to have a better rank, which I believe is not the right way to do it. But one that is very common and some people use it a lot, and sometimes people that I know ask me how to do it, is like installing in your browser the extensions. There's an official Alexa extension for browsers. So if you use that extension, somehow when more people uses that extension, your rank, and of course they visit your website, your ranking gets better. So that's a trick that I believe that is not so bad as the other one, like building artificially bad links and things like that. And some people, when ask me, I let them know, listen, if you want to do something, just install the extension for your browser from Alexa, the official extension of Alexa in your browser. And for us, it's very useful because we sometimes see good pieces, news articles or opinion pieces from websites that we have never visited, and because we have the Alexa extension in our browser, we can check the ranking of that website, and that gives us some information about how reliable or unreliable that website is. You know what I'm trying to tell you? I mean, because the extension that you put in your browser, it opens a button in the like an icon in your browser where you can click and see the ranking of that website, and that's very helpful for the work we do. So that's the only trick that I know about it. I believe that that have no real influence in the improvement of our numbers. But whenever asked me, I always let them know about that trick about the browser extensions thing. But yes, it's complicated. It's a complicated thing. Yes, guys, I believe that we have been talking a lot. So no, I know. I just want to thank you again for accepting the invitations, guys. And I love the work that you do. I am happy because we are doing that kind of job, helping people in the North and English speaking people, how we Latinos think, and that's important because sometimes we are just tired of listening to the white Nordic intellectuals that they think sometimes that they have all the answers, all the questions answered, and the reality is that sometimes they are like as lost or more lost than us.
Yeah.
So I love to do that kind of interactions, and I love that you accepted my invitation, and we will post this soon in our website.
Yeah, listen, Jesus, say thank you, say hello to your team. Your team is pretty strong, it's pretty good.
Yes.
Saheli, I admire her,
yes,
you know, quite a bit.
Sahili, a few months ago, she was shy to be on a Zoom, and now I told her the other day that we have created a monster because she's like right now so good in this Zoom activity.
Say hello to them.
I will send her your greetings.
Thank you for this invitation. María, un abrazo muy fuerte a ti, siempre adelante.
A los dos, muchísimas gracias. This was a wonderful conversation. All we needed was a little glass of wine.
Next time.
Yes, next time maybe.
Gracias,
Un abrazo, compa.
Gracias,
Un
Nino.
abrazo.
Chao.
Enjoy it.
Ciao.